Their client, Deshaun Taylor, was involved with one of the most high-profile criminal cases in South Carolina, the Brittanee Drexel case. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Mark Pepper and David Aylor. You know, I want you to walk with me down memory lane. The following was posted on Facebook on October 6th, and it says the following quote, "Tomorrow on Dr. Phil, there's always two sides to every story. Tune in Friday, October 7th to see David Aylor and Mark Pepper answer some tough questions in the exclusive interview with Dr. Phil." A lot of people don't know this, but you're actually representing Deshaun Taylor, the guy involved with, apparently, with the disappearance of Brittanee Drexel. And that has me thinking, why Dr. Phil, why now?
Well, that's a really good question, because we don't represent Deshaun Taylor in regards to any kind of Brittanee Drexel actual criminal charges, because there are not any criminal charges. We represent Deshaun Taylor in a federal case, which is about a a McDonald's robbery that occurred, that he's actually already been prosecuted for on the state level.
And you know, I watched a portion of that particular interview that Deshaun gave to Dr. Phil. A couple of things stuck up to me. He said he never visited the Blue Water Hotel in Myrtle Beach, never picked up her, and never took her to Clownville. He said he didn't kidnap Brittanee Drexel. He also said he never met Drexel. He just saw her on television and online, I believe. And I'm wondering, after Daquan told Dr. Phil that, what stuck out to you?
Mark, what do you think?
Well, a couple things is when we initially agreed to do the show, we told their producer we would make him an open book, because obviously we had spoken to Deshaun multiple times. It was very apparent to us, as well as our investigation, that it's not physically possible for Deshaun to have seen Brittanee in Myrtle Beach, in McClellanville, wherever she may or may not have been. So we made him an open book. The deal that we made, though, is that we wanted Dr. Phil to give us a platform to explain to 2.2 million viewers the squeeze job that the federal government is putting on him. And by that I mean, referring back to what David's earlier comments were, is that they indicted him on a conspiracy to commit armed robbery for an armed robbery in state court in 2011 that he's already pled guilty to. That's what he retained us on. Okay? It became very apparent to us extremely quickly that they don't care anything about this past armed robbery, but they wanted to squeeze him and squeeze any information he may have about Drexel. And to do that, they decided to use 10 to life to hang over his head. Okay? That was the goal, to be quite candid with you, going on Dr. Phil to explain all that.
Right.
Truth be told, that's not real sexy to his viewers, and so it basically became a show about Drexel, which was fine with us because we were able to get some of those themes out. Right. So that's kind of what stood out to me, is that how Dr. Phil was essentially a little frustrated in that he wasn't able to really kind of get what he thought was going to be a very dramatic episode about this suspect in the Drexel. And he quickly realized, wow, this isn't about Drexel. The federal government is trying to squeeze him on this old charge, and he doesn't know anything. And we were very pleased that Dr. Phil, who's very professional, was able to quickly realize that this was simply just a squeeze job, and there's nothing to squeeze out of him.
David?
I mean, you know, a lot of people from the common view of it people look at this and say, well, this sounds like it's double jeopardy. You know, you have a situation here where, as Mark said, not only did he plead guilty to this charge on the state level, he actually completed his entire sentence. He completed the probation, had no issues. So this whole thing was past him. It was a terrible mistake he made in his youth that is now coming back around simply because there's a jailhouse rat that said he had a major role, along with some other individuals, in the kidnapping and then actual death of Brittanee Drexel, and there's just nothing else that has backed that up. And while again, as Mark said, the TV show was about Brittanee Drexel, we were able to at least put a little information out there about our main concern. And our main concern is the prosecution on the federal level of a state case that Deshaun Taylor has completely served.
Myrtle Beach and McClellanville, the Fed said that Drexel's phone was actually tracked to that particular location. And I know that Deshaun is from there, but he had no possession of her phone whatsoever. The informant, I believe, said that he allegedly had sexual contacts with Brittanee Drexel. You guys have debunked that. What does your heart and mind tell you right now about that?
I think they're looking in the completely wrong arena. I think they ought to be focused on the 4 21-year-old white males who are from Rochester, New York, who ran into Brittanee at Club Kryptonite and are the last people to speak with her, to see her, and more importantly, are the 4 individuals that left all of their possessions in their hotel room at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Myrtle Beach and hauled back to Rochester in the middle of the night with no explanation. That's where the focus of the investigation ought to be if you're actually trying to solve the Brittanee Drexel murder.
Dave?
I mean, in the end of the day, when you have a situation where you have a jailhouse rat, you have to think about the ultimate decision on their basis and what it is. And that is clearly that they're just trying to benefit themselves in some way, and they're coming up with a lot of information that the federal government themselves has already debunked. Unfortunately, caught in the crosshairs is Deshaun Taylor, someone who has never left the McClellanville area, been here his entire life, and was 17 at the time that Brittanee Drexel was kidnapped. Not only was he 17, he was also in school.
That's true. Matter of fact, he also said that on the night of the incident, I believe, he was at a block party on Edisto Island.
With a lot of different family and friends, and there's a lot of different individuals who can confirm that information. So the problem that we face now is we feel like he's been completely candid about the Brittanee Drexel case as a whole and his lack of any knowledge. However, what is still lingering and what is going to be, very threatening to his freedom is this federal case, which is still ongoing, notwithstanding anything to do with Brittanee Drexel.
Yeah. Matter of fact, let's talk about that jail informant because, as you mentioned, I think he was one of the 8 people who were pointed out as the person involved with the case. What does that tell you?
In regards to what we think about what he says,
Right.
we think it's completely false. We think it's a story that he's contrived through different rumors, and a lot of them have already been shown to be completely false, just based off facts and things that can be discovered. And, again, the true victim in his story right now is Deshaun Taylor.
I'll tell you who the other victim is the Mr. and Mrs. Drexel. Because I think it's becoming very apparent to the federal government that this jailhouse rat
Right.
is not telling the truth and may in fact just be making this story up. The federal government is starting to poke so many holes with our help into this jailhouse rat story that at some point in time they're going to have to go back to the Drexel family and break the bad news to them that we thought we had this eyewitness and we came to you and we said we're getting close, we need a couple more, we're going to make an arrest, which they did, we're going to make more. They're going to have to go back, tail between the legs, to the Drexel family at some point and say, we're no closer to solving your daughter's disappearance and potential murder than we were 5 years ago. And that, to me, is the second travesty in all this. It's one thing to hang life in prison over a young kid's head on a crime he's already committed. It's another to completely mislead the Drexel family and then have to go back and essentially apologize and say, we just don't know what happened. So there's 2 travesties going on here that affect really the 2 most important people, the family of the victim and the one being singled out and accused of being involved in something that's physically impossible for him to be involved in.
Go ahead.
And this really started, several months back when there was a press conference saying there was new information. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And at that point, that was when the target, of course, was already Deshaun Taylor. Soon thereafter is when these charges came. Again, these charges, which I think it's important to clarify, these charges not being the charges related to Brittanee Drexel, because there are not any. Not only are there not any for Deshaun Taylor, there's not a single individual that's been charged with any crime related to Brittanee Drexel's disappearance and, again, potential death. So I think that a lot of people maybe on the public eye were confused about that. Oh, this is the guy that kidnapped Brittanee Drexel, now they've got him. That's completely not the case. But once that story subsides, and as Mark says, it continues to show and continues to flourish out that, in fact, he did not have any role in it, and in fact this story is completely false, then we're going to still be left holding the ball on a federal case with some serious time, and that's just scary.
Yeah. I believe he was, what you said, 17 when that happened.
Correct.
For those people who don't know Deshaun Taylor, who is he?
He's a family man. He's a local guy. He's a mechanic. He's hardworking, supports his mother, supports his children, and he's somebody that a lot of people would really appreciate and respect if they got to know him, as well as many people in the community that we've talked to in our own investigations tell us and show us, and of course explain that there's no way that him and his type of nature and his upbringing would have anything to do with anything that happened to Brittanee Drexel.
Yep.
That's exactly right. He's a good kid. And I tell you what else he is. He's confused as all get out. You know, when he was initially arrested,
Right.
and they called my office and said, "Hey, Pep, we need your help here. We've got a kid that just got picked up by the federal government on some armed robbery charge that he's already pled guilty to. But they're not asking him anything about this armed robbery. All they're asking him about is this missing white girl in Myrtle Beach." I was so damn confused. I called in the big dog and said, I'm going to need some help on this case because it's just not making sense to me.
Okay.
And we quickly realized that they don't care about this armed robbery. This was a complete squeeze job. And so imagine yourself or any of your viewing audience who may have pled guilty to a crime in the past. You've done your time, you've rehabilitated yourself, you're back in the community, you're working hard, you're raising a family, and all of a sudden you get a knock on the door and the federal government says, we don't think that case is over. We won't need to talk to you more about that. But they don't talk to you about that. They talk to you about some kidnapping and murder from 6. That's awfully confusing. So, as good a kid he is, as good of a family member as he is really, really equally confused. Rightfully so.
And as much, not only is he confused, he and his entire family are really, really scared. And scared as what's going to end up happening to him.
10 to life. 10 to life is what he's facing on a charge he's already been convicted of and served his time on. Now, if he were to just all of a sudden say, "Oh yeah, I do remember now. I remember seeing her. I remember what happened to her," then all of a sudden that 10 to life goes away. But we're not going to tell our client just to make stuff up. You got to tell the truth. And if the truth is, I don't know what happened to her, guess what? We're back to 10 to life.
Yeah, I mean, trying to come up with something, trying to provide something, obviously that would be wrong on so many levels, but most importantly it would be wrong to the Drexel family, who understandably are suffering greatly and have for several years. But that doesn't excuse the behavior of the way the federal government has worked in this situation and the position that they put Deshaun Taylor in. One that if you go around and ask a lot of other lawyers, as we have in research, it's not something you hear. I think it's important to also comment the fact that the co-defendants involved in the McDonald's robbery have not been recharged federally. What does that tell you?
I was going to ask, when did politics creep into this devastating case?
We'd like to think, as a matter of law, the federal government's at some point going to do the right thing. We've given them the ammunition to do that. We feel more confident now than we did 2 months ago that they're starting to see the light in that Deshaun doesn't know anything about this. We're going to give them the chance to do the right thing.
Okay.
If they don't, we may have to take matters in our own hands.
I mean, they claim that there's a disparity in the sentencing between Deshaun Taylor and his co-defendants. However, within their investigation of the McDonald's robbery, we have confirmed that they never spoke to the solicitor who was involved in the case on the state level. And I believe I'm correct in saying that they never even spoke to the officers involved from the police department who originally investigated it.
Wow.
And all 3 of these individuals, including Deshaun, that pled guilty to being involved in this robbery, either were given what we call a negotiated plea deal, okay, which means they were okay with it and the state was okay with it and a judge approved it, or a recommendation, okay? So for the federal government to come back and say, well, wait a minute now, we don't think he did enough time. Well, the state thought that was enough time, a judge thought that was enough time. It's a squeeze job.
And he completed that time. He didn't violate, he completed it, just like anybody else has to serve their penance for a crime they committed. And that's what he did. And that's where it should have stopped.
Have you guys heard anything about the federal authorities really tracing this back to Rochester by any chance?
They have no interest. They have no interest. Every time I tried to make them understand, you're looking at the wrong. Here's David and I told this yesterday to somebody. We feel like we, as Deshaun's attorney on an armed robbery case, to prevent him from doing 10 to life, are ourselves going to have to go solve the kidnapping and murder of Brittanee Drexel. That's how we feel.
Wow.
And we're going to do everything we can to get that done.
Yeah.
Because it may be the only way to prevent our client from doing 10 to life on a crime he's already been committed.
Wow. Mark Pepper, David Aylor, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Always good to see you, Quintin.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.